Ese es mi idioma nativo y me es mucho más fácil comunicarme con ustedes. Primeramente quisiera darle las gracias a nuestros organizadores por la invitación y a ustedes por estar aquí esta tarde escuchando nuestro panel. Yo no soy estadística, como lo es Matthias, ni tampoco soy de medio ambiente como Marija, pero voy a hablar de ambos temas. Yo trabajo para la cooperación internacional, para el gobierno de la República Dominicana, así es que voy a intentar que ustedes me entiendan. Mi charla es sobre el vínculo entre pobreza y medio ambiente, es sobre un novedoso índice que hemos creado en la República Dominicana, el cual fue utilizado para medir algunos de los ODMs y que está siendo adaptado para medir algunos de los ODS. Primero quisiera dar una información general para entender el porqué. Nosotros somos una isla que estamos en el Caribe, ocupamos las 2/3 partes de la isla, la otra tercera parte la ocupa Haití. Tenemos una población de alrededor de 10 millones, con una población pobre de un 32% y una población en pobreza extrema de un 5.8%, aunque hemos sido catalogados por el Banco Mundial como un país de renta media alta. Eso no significa que seamos ricos, sino que dentro del país hay muchísimas desigualdades, como podrán ver por los índices de pobreza. Más o menos el 60% de la población vive en zonas urbanas y casi como toda la isla está rodeada por agua, pues tenemos el problema de los choques climáticos, ya que nosotros estamos en el paso de huracanes y de terremotos. Aunque la República Dominicana, como les había dicho, ha sido clasificada como un país de renta media, existen muchas brechas estructurales significativas que muestran desigualdades en la población en acceso a servicios básicos y que se agudizan con el paso de fenómenos naturales, en un país en donde urge el desarrollo de algunas infraestructuras físicas y sociales, y que algunas comunidades son poco resilientes a los efectos del cambio climático. Yo no quiero abundar sobre los ODM, ni de los ODS, porque creo que hemos hablado bastante de eso en todo el transcurso de la charla, e inclusive tenemos la siguiente charla también va a hablar del paso de los ODM a los ODS. Simplemente decirles que nosotros hemos creado una plataforma de monitoreo para los ODM, que está siendo adaptada ahora para los ODS, y esta plataforma fue creada por nuestro Ministerio de Economía, Planificación y Desarrollo y la Oficina Nacional de Estadística. Inclusive la pueden encontrar en internet en odm.com.do. Solamente quería hacerles esa... Bueno, como ustedes saben, tanto en América Latina como a nivel global, son muy notables los esfuerzos que se realizan para reducir la pobreza y también para reducir los desastres. Pero parecen que las estrategias son inconexas. Sin embargo, ambos problemas coinciden en la tipología de los hogares vulnerables y ocurren en similitud en los mismos espacios geográficos y como efecto y causas determinantes ambientales que requieren de recursos y coordinación de políticas públicas sectoriales. En ese sentido, el país se ha lanzado en una exploración de las principales articulaciones entre estos dos grandes problemas, pobreza y cambio climático, indagando sobre bases para la construcción de herramientas de política con mayores niveles de sinergia entre los objetivos de desarrollo humano, la reducción de la pobreza, el manejo ambiental y la adaptación climática. Se han realizado diversos estudios precisamente con el apoyo del PNUD para recopilar evidencias sobre la correlación entre esas dos problemáticas nacionales y para construir una herramienta que mida el impacto de algunos choques climáticos en hogares pobres. Esa herramienta permite que el gobierno, a través de las instituciones correspondientes, puedan fortalecer la sinergia entre las políticas que las relacionan. En los últimos años se han recrudecido bastante los choques climáticos y la recurrencia, y se ha evidenciado una clara ampliación de la afectación negativa en las estructuras sociales y económicas, que se prevé se continuará agravando en el futuro, en tanto que el cambio climático avance en la agudización de las condiciones de riesgo. A todo eso se suman las condiciones de un país en desarrollo, que además de generar condiciones que propician una mayor vulnerabilidad de sus hogares, de sus habitantes, tienden a crear asimetrías que propician una mayor vulnerabilidad de sus habitantes y tienden a crear asimetrías que magnifican el impacto de los choques y la volatilidad económica, de manera que terminan generando altos costos en términos de ingreso, crecimiento económico y especialmente en términos de pobreza. Para poder nosotros construir este índice, pues fueron analizados los hogares que presentan vulnerabilidades propias en las comunidades más pobres en el sur de la isla, en el lado del lago Enriquillo, que es la zona donde más pobreza hay en la isla. Y que tienen medios productivos muy sensibles al clima y son muy dependientes de los recursos naturales. Por ejemplo, la construcción de las viviendas son de materiales, los materiales de construcción son precarios y las oportunidades de acceso a los servicios básicos como salud, educación, agua y saneamiento son muy limitados. También se refleja la dinámica de hogares que luchan por sobrevivir con muy poco apoyo estatal. Bueno, aquí más o menos por qué se justifica un índice de vulnerabilidad ante choques climáticos. Bueno, para identificar aquellos impactos que son directos. Los impactos directos son los que son visibles con facilidad y que afectan las vidas, como la destrucción de las viviendas, de los enseres del hogar, de los equipos de trabajo, los medios de transporte. Y también identificar cuáles han sido los impactos indirectos a nivel de hogares que se derivan de un daño principal y son más complejos de identificar, como por ejemplo el deterioro de la salud, la deserción escolar de los niños o el aumento en los costos para seguir produciendo, etcétera. Bien, este es el índice del cual hemos hecho la introducción. Es el índice de vulnerabilidad ante choques climáticos que le hemos llamado el IVAC. El IVAC no es más que un índice que mide la vulnerabilidad de un hogar ante la ocurrencia de un fenómeno natural. Y la vulnerabilidad ambiental se refiere a la posibilidad de que fenómenos naturales como tormentas, inundaciones, sequía o terremotos afecten negativamente a los hogares, tanto de manera física como socioeconómica. El daño provocado por alguno de esos eventos naturales puede ser la pérdida de la propiedad, del empleo, de las fuentes de ingreso y pueden impactar negativamente los logros de los hogares que los hogares han tenido en el tiempo. A través de las informaciones que se recogen en el sistema de datos del Humain, el Humain es la institución nacional que se encarga de hacer la recogida de datos de todos los hogares a nivel nacional y que los cataloga según su situación económica. Esa es la base de datos que nuestro gobierno utiliza para los planes sociales. A través de levantamiento periódico, el Humain actualiza su base de datos e incluye en la mayoría de lo posible variables adicionales relacionadas con pobreza. hemos conocido varios estudios, antes de construir este índice, hemos conocido varios estudios a nivel mundial, pero ninguno como este llega hasta los hogares. Siempre llegan hasta las comunidades. Este índice llega hasta los hogares. El IVAC se crea a partir de la necesidad de incorporar dimensiones climáticas en el desarrollo y la reducción de la vulnerabilidad de hogares pobres rurales ante choques climáticos y su inclusión en la planificación nacional y sus productos. Implica el establecimiento de un vínculo entre la pobreza y el medio ambiente, incluido el cambio climático y la determinación de políticas y programas cuyo objetivo es lograr una mejor gestión ambiental favorable a las personas, mejorar los medios de vida y aumentar la seguridad económica. Existen varios factores que justifican la concepción de este novedoso índice, como son, por ejemplo, que la vulnerabilidad ambiental es una condición preexistente que caracteriza a un individuo, hogar o comunidad. Por lo tanto, un evento natural afecta a cada hogar de manera diferente, porque un hogar puede tener un envejeciente, otro hogar puede tener una persona discapacitada, otro hogar puede tener solamente una pareja. Por lo tanto, cada hogar, un fenómeno atmosférico puede impactar a cada hogar de manera diferente. Y el otro, que existen determinantes de la vulnerabilidad como ambientales y físicos, sociales y socioeconómicos, que todos deben ser considerados en la concepción de instrumentos de planificación y monitoreo. Este índice ya ha sido probado con la última tormenta que tuvo el país y se pudo identificar a nivel de hogares cuál fue el impacto en cada uno de esos hogares. Se probó en la zona sur, como les dije. Ahora este índice va a ser incluido en el monitoreo de los ODS. Entendemos que somos pioneros a nivel mundial en el cálculo de un índice de vulnerabilidad a choque climático aplicado a los hogares, que permite una desagregación geográfica a cualquier escala cartográfica, desde el nivel país hasta el hogar, para conocer cuáles variables y eventos naturales explican mejor la vulnerabilidad ambiental y a través de esos resultados extrapolar dicha información a nivel nacional, tomando en cuenta las características de la vivienda, como por ejemplo la pared, el techo, el piso, y los ingresos laborales promedio del hogar y la cercanía de esos hogares a ríos y arroyos. En materia de seguimiento y monitoreo, el IVAC presenta importantes ventajas para nosotros, porque por un lado permite monitorear la vulnerabilidad de los hogares pobres en un momento específico, puede ser a la hora de la tormenta o en un más largo plazo a través del tiempo. Y por otro lado, permite incorporar una visión integral de problemas sociales multidimensionales como es la pobreza. Como les había dicho, el IVAC está siendo incorporado en el sistema de monitoreo y evaluación de los ODM del Ministerio de Economía, Planificación y Desarrollo. Bueno, ya eso era lo que tenía que contarles.
Well, Ms. Subero, thank you so much for this presentation. This was really informative, particularly when we start seeing links between disparate and discrete events that traditionally we may not find ways to understand the interrelationship. And I think it's very provocative what in the Dominican Republic at present you're doing. So thank you for coming to share that. We have now a presentation from Montenegro, and this is from Marija Mijuskovic. Is that close? Okay, please, Marija, the floor is yours. Thank you.
We'll find out. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers and the UNDP Montenegro for the invitation and support to be here today and to share experience of Montenegro, where we stand now and what is the process of translating SDGs on national level in our country. After restoration of independence of Montenegro in 2006, multilateralism and achieving full membership into United Nations, multilateralism became a priority in our country. So in 2010, we already nationalized Millennium Development Goals, and we prepared a mid-term report and explaining where we stand now in 2010 and what we have to do in next 5 years in order to achieve these goals. And since 2010 until now and next year, we are preparing annual reports on MDGs. And the report for 2014 was just adopted last Thursday by the government of Montenegro. And I won't go into many details because this is the story probably most of you know and are aware about the same processes in your countries. But I just want to show you that where we stand now in 2014 actually, is that we have achieved 5 out of 8 goals regarding the goals on education, on child mortality, improvement of maternal health, combating HIV, AIDS, and communicable diseases, and establishing global partnerships or participating into them. But again, regarding the data we had in 2014, it is very hard to expect that we will achieve goals on eradicating poverty, promotion of gender equality, and ensuring environmental sustainability. So these reports and the information we got during these 5 years were one of the main inputs for for the process of post-2000 national consultations we had in our country during last 2 years. On the national level, we are also following the National Strategy on Sustainable Development, and since 2007, when it's adopted, we are also continuously monitoring the implementation of this strategy, which represents umbrella document for the future development of Montenegro. We were very active. Montenegro was very active member of the Open Working Group for Sustainable Development Goals, and afterwards in intergovernmental negotiations. And these inputs we had as reports from the MDGs and National Strategy on Sustainable Development, together with the post-2015 national consultations, were actually very useful for us, not only to participate on global process of defining the global agenda, but also to monitor and evaluate what we have done since the 2000 and since till 2015. In that regard, after consultations on the results of these reports and process of consultations with the citizens, we undertook, with the support of UNDP of Montenegro, direct consultations with our citizens in 2 phases. We didn't just send them questionnaires, but we also had the focus groups, workshops, and face-to-face interviews where we asked them, where do you see Montenegro in 2013, and what do you think we should do until 2013 to achieve that goal? So participation in the global processes actually helped us to define the path we want to go until 2030. That path actually represents the future National Sustainable Development Strategy for the period 2015-2030. We aspire that this umbrella document, which already exists, but we are now in the process of revision, we aspire it to be a nationalized SDGs. So during all these last 2 years, in parallel with global processes, we were actually defining the national strategy, and we are trying to link each national goal with the Sustainable Development Goal. And at this moment, we are in the most complex, I think, process about defining indicators for each measure within this national strategy on sustainable development goals. I won't go into details. This is just the outline of the existing draft of the National Strategy on Sustainable Development. And this is what I said. Within the National Strategy on Sustainable Development, we are focusing on 4 sets of resources: human resources, social resources, natural resources, and economic resources. And within all these sets of resources, we are developing measures and indicators, and we are trying to link each of these measures and indicators with the existing sustainable development goals and with the existing list of indicators on the global level. That's very challenging and not at all a simple task we have, especially when you live in a small country and you have a very limited number of people who are dealing with the statistics. So at this moment, we were very proud that we, after comparing the national and global list of indicators, we found out that we are missing only 30% of the defined global indicators. So as you will see here, I'll just pick ones. For example, within the social resources, if the emphasis is on education, on strengthening the values, combating corruption, and we just linked it with the sustainable goals and targets defined underneath. Within the natural resources, we linked it with the goal 6, with goal 12, 13, 14, and 15. Within economic resources, we linked it with the goal 8 and similar. But you can see from these slides that some of the goals are overlapped because not all goals are clearly for only one area. So where we stand now and what we are about to do in the future period is developing a 5-year action plan and of course setting up this monitoring system for the monitoring of the implementation of this action plan. But we are very challenged to set up the list of indicators. So now we are going within this available list of indicators on national level. And one of the questions we have, and can be maybe discussed within the panel, is what to do with the complex indicators, because on the global level, as you know, complex indicators are still in the dispute, I can say it like that. We are trying to preserve those because we think that, for example, ecological footprint, domestic use of resources, similar, at least can be kept on the national level so it can show the implementation of the national strategy on sustainable development on national level. We don't have to report it on global level. On the other hand, we would also aspire to establish information system and database so we can easily follow these indicators and monitor the progress on a daily level, why not? To achieve all this, we also need to make an overview. What capacity building do we need in the statistical sense and also in the sense of the government and the civil servants? Because we usually say that we do monitoring and evaluation for each of these national policies. For example, National Strategy on Sustainable Development. We have 5 reports so far, and we say we monitor and evaluate, but actually, I learned it in this conference that the evaluation we do is not the evaluation that should be done because we are doing just a small part. We are consulting with the civil servants from other sectors and just going through the measures and saying this has been done and this hasn't been done due to these factors, economic crisis usually and similar. So one of the messages also that we would like to send from this panel is also we would like to propose a participatory accountability mechanism as one of the very useful tool for monitoring later the implementation of SDGs, because within this post-2015 national consultations we had, we tested one of the participatory accountability mechanism on one chosen national policy, and citizens responded because it was public. They had a chance to have direct communication with the relevant ministry and to ask them directly why this hasn't been done, even it's adopted 5 years ago, etc. The test was run only for 1 week, but it showed us that it can really be helpful both for us and for the promotion of the national policies that are existed and for the improvement of those policies. So that would be shortly from my side. Thank you.
Well, Maria, thank you very much for that presentation. I took a couple of particular insights from what you said. One is the fact that their country developed a set of indicators independently of the SDG indicators, and when the two were juxtaposed and you could look at the national indicators and the SDG, they had all but 30%. I think this really speaks well for kind of a reality grounding of the SDG indicators, because here is a country, Montenegro, that has on its own done its indicator construction work, and it had 70% overlap with what the SDGs. So if we had a pilot or a trial like this in 5 or 10 countries, we might see that the SDGs are going to be at 85, 90, 95% compatibility with what individual countries are doing. I think this is a very strong signal that the SDG indicators are not up in the clouds and decoupled from reality. So that's one. And the other point that I took from her presentation that I thought was rather provocative and interesting is the idea of making your indicators participatory and getting the data for people's understanding of the indicators and people's application of the indicators being also participatory. Very interesting. Very, very well done. Thank you. We have now a third presentation by a statistician. You guys, we got a real live statistician here from the UN office in New York City, and his name is Matthias Reister. And Matthias has been involved for the last 3 days in some very serious negotiations and confrontations, perhaps, but surely negotiations. Echo. About the statistical and the indicator issues embedded in the SDGs. So it's like we're getting a very real-time report on sort of the developments to date of how the emergence of the statistical analysis that's going to need to be done on all of these indicators is starting to evolve and come together. So it's with pleasure to invite Matthias Reister from UN Statistical Office in New York to give us an update. Matthias?
Thank you very much, Ray, for this kind introduction. Thank you very much to UNDP for inviting us here and distinguished experts on monitoring and evaluation. I'm very pleased to be here. So my boss is always joking, statisticians are like dentists. Maybe he's referring to the fact that you only see us once a year. So I hope now that the communities maybe get closer together, we will see each other more often. So I'm here to inform you about the global SDG indicators that are discussed. I would like to inform you how we are getting those. And then I will also maybe point out some challenges and some links to our presentations that we had before. The first, what I would like to speak about is the mandate of the statistical community. So as you know, in New York, there has been a process of developing the post-2015 development agenda. And on 25th of September, heads of state agreed to the outcome document and agreed to the 17 goals and 169 targets. And also in the outcome document, they also made reference to indicators. And in this outcome document, they mandated the so-called interagency and expert group on SDG indicators to come up with a proposal for global indicators. This proposal will be provided to the Statistical Commission, which always meets in March of every year. So this group has been meeting the last 3 days to discuss the global indicators. But to come back to the mandate, also in the outcome document, there was made a reference to a global SDG progress report. This means the UN Secretary has been mandated to produce a report on the SDGs indicators every year. You would think this is all normal, this is all good. I would like to point out that for the MDGs, no such clear mandate existed. So for statisticians working on the MDGs, at the beginning it was very hard to set up the proper reporting because there was no clear mandate. But this time we are very fortunate, we have a clear mandate, which is very good. Also what has been recognized by member states, there is, looking at this high number of goals and targets, there is a need for statistical capacity building that has been pointed out, and we are very happy that this has been recognized. Maybe not touching anything here anymore. Now the process, I would like to speak a little bit about the process, how we are getting to these indicators. So the Statistical Commission agreed to create this interagency and expert group on SDG indicators, and their countries came together with agencies to discuss the indicators. So over the summer we had multiple rounds of consultations with the members of the group, so with national statistical offices, but also open to agencies, and also rounds of consultations with civil society to provide us with input on the best indicators. Now, all this process that has been not only going on over the summer, but in fact, the preparation of that process took place over the last 2 years. So statisticians have been discussing in parallel with the politicians, while politicians have been discussing their agenda. We have been discussing the possibilities of indicators to support this agenda. So this 2.5-year process cumulated now in the last 3 days here in a meeting in Bangkok, where the IEG SDG got together for its second meeting. And here at that meeting, we had before us a list of 205 indicators, and we separated these 205 indicators in green indicators, where we knew there's already a significant agreement, yellow indicators that are to be discussed at the meeting, and gray indicators, where we knew they are not yet ready. More discussions need to take place. So in total, at the meeting, we discussed in detail 120 indicators. So now after these 3 days, we're quite exhausted. 120 indicators. Each indicator really has a specific topic behind, and the members of the group really discussed that in detail. So now the outcome of these 3 days of discussion is that we have now a total of 159 so-called green indicators, where the meeting already agreed that these are good indicators. These indicators now, they have a technical finalization process over the next 3 weeks, because sometimes we might not have gotten the exact formulation right, but of course it has to be really correct. So 159 green indicators, where we already are saying this is what we are sending to the Statistical Commission for adoption. And then also 65 gray indicators, where members of that group felt more discussion is needed. The process on how we will discuss these 65 additional indicators will have to be still established, but at this time they will be included in the list of indicators, but with the clear qualification that further discussion is needed. So in some cases, those indicators are maybe already quite close to what will be eventually adopted, but in other cases, really much further discussion is needed. So now, how is this process now going further forward? As I have been saying, this list of indicators, which is encompassing a total of 224 indicators, again 159 green and 65 gray, will be sent to the Statistical Commission, which meets in March, and then assuming adoption of that list, that will then be also sent to the general, or to ECOSOC and the General Assembly for final adoption. So this is the overall process so far. And shortly, we are working on some editorial. We have to do a little editorial work, but in the next couple of days, this list of 224 indicators will be made available on our SDG indicator website. So if you want to know what is the outcome of the last 3 days of discussions that we had here in Bangkok, you will find that list on our website. Now let me briefly speak about challenges. So it's very clear from statistical perspective. With the MDGs, we had a much smaller number of indicators, and also not only was the scope much smaller with the MDGs, now it's much wider. Also, there is a clear mandate not to leave anyone behind. That means, in the language of statisticians, it means we have to disaggregate data. To disaggregate data for different population groups by income, by gender, by age. If your data is survey-based, this is money. This is money. You have to increase your survey sizes significantly to get all of those disaggregations, and so hard choices are to be made. That's for sure. So for statistical offices, so they need the financial and the human resources to deal with that. And I think we are very glad that for the first time since I remember in my statistical career, going back now 20 years, for the first time, statistics is really discussed also at the highest level. So this is very encouraging, but still many members that we are having, they're very small statistical offices that they do not have much staff, and if they have good staff, it's very hard to retain them. Once the staff are trained, they are leaving. So this is not the way you can build up a sustainable statistical system. So there really needs to be a significant investment in statistical capacities. Then there is also the question not only of resources, there is also the question of how to do it. And here Marija gave a very good example how one country already went ahead, developed its own indicators, and tried to reconcile the national with the global indicators. I think this is a necessary process in all countries, and it also requires a discussion of priorities. I cannot speak really on the political side, but for the statistical side, looking at this broad agenda and these huge requirements, countries will have to prioritize. And this prioritization, of course, must come from the political level. Now also a third element I would like to speak about when talking about the challenges, or also actually it's an opportunity. What's really nice about the SDGs is that they cover all dimensions and all aspects. That allows for statisticians to really try to integrate the data sources. With the MDG, it was mostly social, so there were the surveys that you were conducting in the social area, and it was never a connection to to economic statistics. But now the new agenda is really economic, social, environmental. This really should provide a big impetus to integrate the data systems and to strengthen them. So now the link to the previous presentations. As I already said, a lot of work is ahead to make the global agenda work on national level, on the policy side, but also on the statistical side. And then the statistical side and the policy side, they have to be reconciled. So there need to be a lot of discussion between the policymakers and the statisticians, because in order to monitor the things that you would like to achieve, you need to have the right data. So in that sense, I'm looking really forward. I'm very excited now that we have those indicators, because now it's a time that we already can start going to countries and talk about all these issues. That concludes my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Well, Matthias, thanks very much for that update. A couple of things struck me immediately about your presentation. One is the fact that we may actually start to get yearly or close to yearly updates. I can recall back when we first started the work on the MDGs, there was long periods of silence, sort of globally, people talking to each other. What's going on? I don't know. Do you know what's going on? No, I don't know. And there was a general sense of a very different, real information gap between the activities of the people on the ground and what could be said collectively. And everyone, of course, wondering about China and wondering about India, the two largest countries involved in the MDGs. And between them, it's more than 2.5 billion people in China and India. So if we're in fact able to start to put an infrastructure in place so that we will have something approximate to a yearly report, this is going to be great news. This is absolutely going to be great news. I have to say, I appreciate your optimism and about more than 220 indicators. I mean, any of you who have worked in M&E systems anywhere in the world, 220 indicators is a lot of indicators. And I just have to say in all of this, be careful what you pray for, because you might get them. And he's already got 159 of them. So the others will be coming. And but I think it is going to take a kind of a reconceptualization for all of the countries and all of the folks who are going to be trying to put these indicator systems together, of thinking through the immensity of trying to have global indicators for more than 220 and as disparate as energy and as environment and as economics and of health and I mean, this is really a massive undertaking. But then again, we're in the 21st century. So maybe we can start thinking differently. The paradigms are shifting. From traditional data systems, in a sense, what this represents for me is the emergence of big data. We're really into a world of big data. We've talked about it. There are articles about it. There are even books in process on the issues surrounding big data. But now this is for real. This is big data. And it'll be interesting to see how institutionally we all struggle with trying to find means of dealing with big data. Well, we have one more speech that was not on the announced program, but it's a wonderful honor to have here from Morocco, Dr. Hamadi Abdelfettah, who is going to talk to us about development of multi-dimensional indicators of poverty. This is really turning out to be a wonderful seminar. Thank you so much, Dr. Hamadi, for coming and joining us.
Bonsoir tout le monde, je vais intervenir en français si vous permettez. C'est facile pour moi. Donc, c'est ma présentation, donc elle va parler de quelques indicateurs qu'on a développés au sein de notre institution. Donc, tout d'abord, je vais présenter. Donc, je suis Hamadi Abdelfettah de Maroc. Je travaille au sein de l'Observatoire national du développement humain. Donc, si vous permettez, c'est une institution indépendante, étatique, qui est chargée principalement de deux principales missions. Il y a l'observation, qui permet de mieux connaître les conditions et l'état de la situation de développement humain au Maroc. À ce titre, l'ONDH produit et collecte également des informations auprès des institutions internationales, des départements ministériels et les autres départements. Donc, pour une meilleure connaissance du développement humain. La deuxième mission, qui est importante, c'est l'évaluation. Pourquoi évaluer? Pour une meilleure et une grande efficacité des actions, des programmes qu'on met en place pour hisser le niveau de développement au Maroc. Donc, pour pouvoir remplir cette mission, l'ONDH a développé plusieurs outils un outil phare parmi ces outils, c'est le système d'information. Donc, ce système a deux principaux objectifs. Le premier, c'est vraiment de mesurer périodiquement l'étendue, la profondeur et l'évolution de la pauvreté et également les indicateurs du développement humain. La deuxième mission, c'est évaluer la pertinence, l'efficience, l'efficacité et la pertinence des programmes mis en œuvre par les partenaires, par les départements ministériels. Donc, la structure de ce système, donc on est composé en 5 composantes. Nous avons un entrepôt de données. Son caractéristique, c'est qu'il est unique. Donc, on met là-dedans toutes les informations, y compris les enquêtes, y compris les bases de données, tout dans un seul unique entrepôt qui est évolutif. Évolutif, ça veut dire à tout moment, on peut ajouter de nouvelles dimensions, comme l'éducation, la santé et de suite, de nouveaux indicateurs. Donc, nous avons, à partir de cette banque de données, nous avons mis en place un tableau de bord, je vais l'expliquer tout à l'heure. Un centre virtuel, c'est une bibliothèque virtuelle avec une base de données en texte intégral. Également, un système d'information géographique, je vais le développer tout de suite, et une série d'enquêtes, ce qu'on appelle les enquêtes auprès des ménages. Nous avons pratiquement 8000 ménages qu'on suit de manière périodique pour avoir des données réellement sur l'individu dans l'espace. Comme ça, on peut vraiment calculer, évaluer nos indicateurs. Donc, c'est les caractéristiques de notre système. C'est une solution full web, un accès libre actuellement. Donc, vraiment, on s'inscrit dans l'accès ou la démocratie à l'accès à l'information. En 3 langues, l'anglais, le français et l'arabe, avec en disponibilité de l'information, une approche multidimensionnelle. Tous les thèmes qui sont liés au développement humain, on le trouve. Donc, nous avons l'éducation, la santé, l'emploi, la gouvernance, la pauvreté, le bien-être, la gouvernance, plusieurs indicateurs on trouve. Il y a également la couverture internationale, nationale et même territoriale. On va voir ça. Et bien sûr, notre système nous permet de faire des cartographies permettant de générer des profils de développement humain et bien évidemment de l'analyse des disparités territoriales. Donc, je vais juste commencer par quelques cas. Je vais présenter une technique avancée qu'on a mise en place pour évaluer l'impact, parce que notre système, ce n'est pas vraiment calculer les indicateurs, mais également faire l'évaluation. Donc, juste un exemple d'un programme que le gouvernement a mis en place en 2005. C'est un programme qui vise la réduction de la pauvreté et lutter contre l'exclusion au milieu urbain. Donc, c'est un programme qui cible pratiquement 500 communes rurales et 700 quartiers urbains. Avec plusieurs programmes, 4 programmes. Actuellement, on a intégré, on a ajouté un 5e programme pour vraiment les quartiers où ce qu'on appelle le programme de la mise à niveau territorial, ça pour vraiment les zones enclavées et montagneuses. Donc, nous avons évalué ce programme, mais ce qu'on cherche vraiment, c'est l'impact de ce programme sur les conditions socio-économiques de la population cible. Donc, pour cela, nous avons utilisé une technique très développée, une technique vraiment qui est basée sur ce qu'on appelle le contrefactuel. Ça veut dire vraiment essayer d'évaluer le changement des variables de résultats pour deux populations, population cible et population non cible, mais qui sont semblables par rapport aux critères de choix qu'on a mis en place pour cibler les communes. Donc, voilà, je vais donner juste un exemple. Voilà, j'ai par exemple ici le taux de pauvreté. Là, c'est l'axe de revenu. Normalement, tous vous connaissez, c'est une fonction décroissante. Voilà. Normalement, si la courbe reste lisse, ça veut dire que le programme n'a pas d'effet. Mais c'est le programme. Je vais montrer, pardon. Donc, on a choisi un seuil de 30% comme facteur, ou là, comme ce qu'on appelle variable de forcing, pour sélectionner, pour cibler les communes. Donc, toutes les communes qui ont un taux de pauvreté supérieur à 30, ce sont les cibles. moins sont non cibles. Donc, on a choisi vraiment dans la frontière, comme ça, des communes qui sont semblables, ça veut dire des communes qui n'ont pas cible, mais qui ont un taux de pauvreté proche de ceux, et des communes qui sont proches, mais qui sont cibles. Donc, si la courbe reste comme ça, donc il n'y a pas d'effet. Mais, c'est par exemple, voilà la population cible, ici c'est la population non cible, mais s'il y a un changement, une fracture, là vraiment, on peut dire que notre programme, il a un impact positif sur les conditions socio-économiques de la population. Et seulement ce programme, ça veut dire, parce que généralement, dans un environnement, il y a plusieurs programmes, mais là, on essaie de neutraliser l'effet des autres et capter seulement l'impact de ce programme. Là, c'est juste un exemple, donc je vais passer aux indicateurs. Là, c'est vraiment les calculs qu'on a fait pour montrer. Donc, comme résultat, le revenu dans les zones cibles a augmenté pratiquement de 49%. Donc, je vais passer. Donc, c'est pas la bonne version. Voilà, ça, c'est un autre. Vraiment géolocaliser tous les établissements à caractère social, ça veut dire les écoles, les dispensaires, dans nos territoires. Donc, avec des indicateurs comme l'axe 2, c'est l'axe économique. Donc, on a pris ce qu'on appelle le seuil de pauvreté, le seuil de vulnérabilité. Ça veut dire, ici, je peux segmenter la population en termes de carence. Là, pour l'autre axe, je peux segmenter la population en termes de pauvreté. Donc, normalement, j'ai plusieurs carreaux, mais les rectangles qui sont plus importants, ça, c'est le carreau vulnérabilité et sans vulnérabilité. Là, qui est en vert, c'est vraiment les personnes qui sont non pauvres et qui ne sont pas vulnérables. Le carreau qui est important, c'est la pauvreté extrême. Ça veut dire des gens pauvres économiquement et qui ont plus de 3 carences. Donc, avec ce cadre d'analyse, on peut vraiment mieux cibler tous les programmes, mieux cibler la population pour vraiment mettre en place des programmes et des stratégies qui sont vraiment adéquates pour hisser le niveau de développement. Par exemple, je peux mettre un programme spécial pour la pauvreté extrême, un autre pour la pauvreté modérée, pour essayer de faire sortir ces gens de ces pauvretés. Donc, comme perspective, côté mesure, c'est la définition de nouvelles dimensions d'indicateurs, c'est la finalisation de notre rapport de développement humain. Donc, c'est un rapport qui intègre plusieurs indicateurs. Là également, c'est l'élaboration des rapports ou les tableaux de bord sur les ODD. Malheureusement, je n'ai pas la diapo sur le tableau de bord. Tout simplement, on a exploité la base de données internationale. On a pris 156 indicateurs. On essaie de positionner le Maroc à l'intérieur de l'échiquier international. Mais chaque indicateur, on a développé 4 classes de performance. Il y a le faible, le moyen, acceptable et bon. Donc, basé sur des techniques statistiques poussées, comme ça, au lieu pour faciliter la lecture pour les décideurs. Donc, pour chaque classe, nous avons seulement 4 niveaux. Donc, facilement, on peut localiser le niveau de développement de notre pays. Actuellement, on travaille sur l'actualisation pour, premièrement, la mise à jour et deuxièmement, c'est l'intégration des objectifs, les indicateurs de développement durable, les ODD. Donc, comme perspective, c'est le renforcement de partenariats pour les données, toujours comme vous avez cité, aller vraiment vers la désagrégation des données au niveau spatial, donc au niveau individuel en fait. C'est pour cela qu'on a mis en place notre enquête panel pour avoir des données sur l'individu. Nous avons des données très détaillées, donc on peut calculer n'importe quel indicateur et proposer de nouveaux outils et de nouveaux indicateurs pour vraiment mieux comprendre et mieux connaître le développement et bien sûr développer des thématiques spécifiques. Et merci pour votre attention.
I think it's a very interesting example, and we have a second country here. We had Montenegro, and now we have Morocco, who are able to start the process of putting the data systems in place that are going to be necessary for the SDGs to move forward. I think it's also the case that you can see with Morocco big data, that they're doing rather extensive collection across categories, across regions, and they've already moved with some of the early aggregation. I wanted to mention, in terms of the presentation, there was one point that you may have missed or noticed, but when he was talking about the counterfactual and the analysis that they were trying to do with the counterfactual, his example was the use of indicator information with an interrupted time series design. And this is absolutely the right thing to be doing if you want to use indicator data to try and do quasi-experimental designs, which is what he was reporting. So it's a very nice illustration. I want to thank you, maybe intentionally, maybe not intentionally, but to give us that sense that it's possible to use indicator data sometimes when you're looking at time series data. So we have had 4 interesting and varied presentations this afternoon. We have had presentations from Dominican Republic, from Montenegro, from Morocco, and from the UN Statistical Office. And now to try and make some sense of all of this variety and rich variety, I'm inviting Indra Naidu to give us his commentary.
Thank you to the presenters for excellent inputs. Most certainly very rich, quite historic to have some of the colleagues also from the UN Statistical Office here today. And that was discussions that we had initiated in New York. Because quite often we hear about the statisticians in a very remote way, yet to a marked extent it's the basis on which we draw. My task has been made easy. I'll just make a few comments given the summation that Ray did at the end of each presentation. But I would like to relate this discussion back to the theme of the conference, which is blending the principles with people's lives with the SDGs. And all 4 presentations cut to the chase very clearly from a methodological, strategic, and political level on those parts. So I'm not going to individually refer to each of the presentation in order to give some time. I think the point that permeates all the presentations, and that includes the last one on statistics, is the whole question of the difficulty and variability. That the contexts are very different, there's high variability, and in some of the work that we have been doing in assessing development interventions of the UNDP, when there is a call for better data and better statistics, those capacities are not available in the country. So it's very difficult sometimes with the resources available to bring in people to ensure that the census and the survey, etc., is done well. So in many cases, you don't have good baseline and you are basing your assessments on very outdated and dangerous data, which is just not credible. And I think we need to admit as an evaluation community, but also as users of evaluation, that the basis on which we draw our analysis, even though we may claim that we are looking at it from multiple perspectives, can be quite dubious. Also noting there's a political context in terms of data. So what you get as official data and official census is quite different from what the truth is, because this links to the broader issue of how governments wish to convey their country, and that leads to other issues in terms of the old scramble for resources internationally, as I would call it. So that's the first issue. The second point that has come through quite clearly, I think, in the first and third presentation, this journey in terms of the SDGs also presents a unique opportunity to re-engage and reinvigorate communities. So it was very heartening to hear going back and engaging and asking questions, what do you think? And I think the data that was given yesterday on the 8 million persons that had been consulted on the SDGs, no one left behind, a better world for all, has to a marked extent for this time, reignited the centrality of citizens in the whole development debate and discourse. There was a period when the quantitative revolution was at its peak, when there was a fetish almost on the methods and the methodology, and the people were just not there. Every statistic, every piece of data, every number has a human face and a human being behind it, and as development practitioners, it should not be forgotten. The third part I wish to raise, which was brought through by the presentations, is the process led to critically appraising. The process, the quality of the process is best when there is a quality that leads to a high level of criticality. And that in itself comes about not when it is led by any sector, whether it is the non-government or the community or the government or the donors. It only comes about when the collective is there, because that in itself will give a power to ensure that all the perspectives are taken into account. And too often, in the absence of meaningful and genuine engagement with the spectrum of issues and the variability of communities and the high level of social and political and economic differentiation, what you do have is the processes do get captured. And even the process of leading to defining and measuring and reporting on the indicators can potentially be captured, because there are also very high political stakes in terms of what the results are. The fourth point is the question of the intersections between scale and the temporal and the spatial dimension. Many of the speakers have spoken about differentiation, about variability, but that is something that quite often evaluators have a problem with, because we tend to come up with this judgment. We are not too comfortable with giving a finding that says, in these circumstances, with these conditions, this is what we found. In other circumstances, this is what we found. It comes across pretty much hegemonic and pretty much blunt. But the advantage and potential of the SDGs, given the fact that there are so many array, and that can be a nightmare, is that it is likely to capture more of the variability than the MDGs. And in capturing the variability, it's likely to also reflect a world that still remains highly differentiated and highly unequal. And depending on how that is managed, I think it will, as Robert mentioned it, there's no more developed and developing. We all are developing. And if everyone is developing, it means that every country, even if assumed to have reached this pinnacle of so-called excellence, has areas that need to be developed. And to move away from these very problematic categories of the first, second, and third world, because in a context of high differentiation, you have high variability within all contexts. So inequality and intra-regional differentiation is much higher. I like the point that was made about the ease at which the country-level indicators were reconciling with the SDGs. And that is an extremely powerful point. It also reflects the quality of negotiations that did lead to the adoption in New York, because this was a process that went beyond a very discrete set of indicators which were monitored but not evaluated. So even though my office had produced an assessment of the impact of the role of the UNDP in the MDGs, whilst we give credit in terms of the scorekeeping area, we do have to show that the nature was quite limited. But also it happened in an era which 15 years ago was quite different from the era we are now, where we have big data. And I think what that means is, and the statisticians should get happy about this, that people would start getting more numerate, more literate in understanding these numbers, because of the social revolution that moved in highlighting this whole discussion. The sixth point is, we need to be very careful before we make the judgment, and that's the question of scale and aggregation. How do you move up from local to sub-regional to regional to national when there are high levels of intra-regional, intra-national differentiation? Because what comes out as an average often masks the true inequality that exists within that geographic space. And if you were to intersect that with all the issues of ethnicity and gender and unpack on that, you'll find it is not a comfortable discussion that the governments would have. because it may show that, yes, at a national level for some people it's okay, but quite frankly, this really, the data hides more than it shows. The last point is the question of big data. We can accept that there's going to be great volume of data, but we need to be very cautious that the volume does not swamp us in becoming so consumed with looking at what is the credibility and how do we use this, etc., when we forget that that data is simply reflecting what should be the real issue, which is bringing about a change in the lives of citizens, which should be articulated not just in data, but also in the qualitative experiences, whether life has changed for them. Hence, back to the theme of the conference, blending the principles, the ethics, the independence, credibility, utility, with the real experience on life, and in order to bring about development outcomes. Those are my few comments on the presentation. Thank you.
Indran, thank you. Very sharp, very sharp. You honor us with your commentary. Well, we have had a rich conversation. By my calculation, we have 9 minutes left. If any of you would like to raise a question for any of our presenters or the commentator, we have a bit of time to take that on. So please, if you have, here's one question right here.
Thank you very much. I'm Ponwan Utawong, Deputy Director General of Department of Planning, Ministry of Planning and Investment, Laos. And thank you very much for very interesting presentation. And I just like to share a little bit that we are now come up with the final, nearly final version of 5-year plan for the period of 2016 and 2020. And also we came up with a M&E framework. And we try to involve, as speakers mentioned, that participatory and all sectors and provinces proposed. So we came up with more than 500 indicators. And so we try to reduce, and now about 180. So I like to learn more from the speakers that what would you suggest that at the national level, how, because we have 3 levels at the national and then sectoral and provinces. So how are we gonna do it better for, to come up with the very applicable M&E? And also now I have attended another session this morning, and also we try to have M&E framework, and also at the same time a national evaluation policy framework. So how this kind of 2 things, so M&E framework and national evaluation policy framework should be, formulated at the national level. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think perhaps we could take this gentleman's comment here, and then we'll see if, because we're going to be very close to time.
Just 2 quick questions. Thank you to the presenter. I have one question on Morocco presenter. It will be in French, because the presenter was in French. Je voulais juste savoir, vous avez adressé la partie monétaire de la pauvreté, mais les autres aspects, les autres dimensions de la pauvreté, les parties liées aussi aux inégalités, aux exclusions, comment vous arrivez à identifier ça dans votre pays? And the second question is referred to the SDG, Statistical Office of UN. I want just to know what is the rationale behind 224 indicators. Where we make calculation, it is the average about 13 indicator per SDG. I want you to know what is the rationale behind. And as Indran raised it, we need to contextualize, to take in consideration the context of specific country. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to hold the questions here. We've got only 2 minutes left. So if you would like to respond, there's a mic right there, Hamadi, and then for Matthias.
C'est bon. Donc, pour votre question, qui est une question qui est très très pertinente, c'est vraiment la partie d'application. Oui, je vous remercie pour cette question pertinente. Vraiment, le choix les dimensions des indicateurs, c'est vraiment la tâche la plus difficile. Vraiment, mais pour notre cas, donc, nous avons des études qu'on a fait en avant, donc sur la perception, donc on a identifié les dimensions, il y avait un débat entre les experts, donc comme ça, on arrive vraiment à choisir. Il y a également un rapport, un bon rapport qu'on a fait, un rapport de cinquantenaire de développement de Maroc, donc qui a identifié ce qu'on appelle les nœuds de futur. Donc déjà, nous avons un référentiel, comme ça, on sait bien vraiment les dimensions qui posent problème jusqu'à présent pour le Maroc. L'éducation, la santé, l'économie, l'accès aux services de base, comme ça, on a déjà le logement, donc on sait déjà les dimensions sur lesquelles on doit travailler. Il reste la phase, c'est la sélection des indicateurs. Donc au niveau de chaque dimension, il y a vraiment une vingtaine, trentaine, 50, quel indicateur on va choisir. Je prends l'emploi, quel taux de chômage, taux d'emploi, taux de chômage pour longue durée. Donc toujours, il y a des discussions. Mais à la fin, donc, avec les experts, on se met d'accord. Voilà les indicateurs qu'on va choisir. Est-ce que notre système statistique, déjà, il peut nous fournir ces indicateurs parce qu'il y a la pertinence et la disponibilité de l'information. Donc deux éléments qui sont très, très déterminants dans le choix de l'indicateur. Donc c'est le processus qu'on a adopté pour établir donc, déjà, donc c'est un processus qui est continu, donc on améliore, on cherche pour vraiment sélectionner les indicateurs qui reflètent la spécificité dans notre contexte et notre réalité. Merci.
Thank you. Matthias, now the final word is yours.
Oh, okay, maybe not a final.
This is it, Matthias.
Okay.
You have it. All
Yes,
right.
thank you. So I think statisticians would have preferred a smaller set of indicators, limited office. All targets need to be monitored. That brings 169 indicators, but then many of the targets have multiple aspects. And then there was a real attempt to also cover those aspects. So this is the reason why we are now at over 200 indicators. So there was already a basis of around 200, and then some more were added, which were found covering additional aspects that were not yet properly covered and which are very important. And that is the reason why we have so many. So it's very ambitious in this sense. The set of indicator is a aspirational set, as the agenda is aspirational, but what will be actually monitored, will it be available in the next 5 years? Of course, it's very unlikely there will be data for 200 indicators, to tell you the truth. Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Panel, Indran is our commentator. Thank you for a wonderful set of presentations. I think this was really a quality event. Please join me in thanking all of them.